reporter. Okay, she has covered 9 or 10 presidents. She's about 88 years old now. Well, she befriended me, and when I first came to Washington, D.C., I've been in office now in Congress since 1998. And as the years went by, you know, we'd meet periodically. She'd call me and she'd say, honey, come on, we have to have dinner and we got to talk about this. I said, okay. After 9/11, she did this a little more frequently after my vote against giving this administration this blank check. She said to me, you know, it's time you write your story. I said, no, Helen. She said, yes, you've got to, for several reasons. She said to me, there's enough in the public domain now about you that someone else is going to write one of these days. So you better start thinking about writing one yourself. Now that was 1 year she told me that. I waited and I said, no, there's no way, because in a memoir you have to be authentic. And I'm a very private person, and I said, no way. So then she kept working on me and working on me and working on me. The next few months she called me again and she said, it's important that you define yourself. It's important for people to define, especially people in public life, to define who they are. And then I thought about what she said. I said, yeah, I know what you mean. And then I thought about how oftentimes the media demonizes us. After 9/11, I didn't know who they were talking about when they were describing me. I was called a traitor. They said I was unpatriotic. They accused me of acts of treason. I mean, this person was a monster. I couldn't figure out who they meant. My dad was a 25-year military officer. I was born in El Paso, Texas. Fort Bliss, Texas. Both my dad and my stepdad were stationed there. And so we grew up in a military family. And I'm as patriotic as anyone. I honor our troops. I remember those 2 wars, and here we have a war hero who understands what war is about. And so no one wants to send our young men and women into harm's way unless it's absolutely necessary. And I knew that. And so why would the Rush Limbaughs of the world call me all these names? And that was Helen's point. She said, it's about time you set forth. She said, nobody knows you came up in a military family. She said, you know, people believe what they hear. So after another year, I mean, this went on, and I mean, this is not a matter of months that she encouraged me. This went on and on and on. Finally, she actually had her agent call me. I did not follow up at all. And she had her agent call me and track me down and sit me down and walk me through why I needed to do this. And so I started writing, and you know, we have all these issues around ethics, so I couldn't take an advance, so I couldn't pay a ghostwriter, and I happen to be a fairly decent writer. I love to write. So I ended up writing a book proposal, and the rest is history. So I wrote this, had plenty of editors, but I actually wrote this myself. And it was a very difficult book to write, and I'll tell you why. Because there's some chapters in here which were, my mother read and said, when did that happen? My sister read it, she said, no way. My other sister read it, and she says, come on. You know, and I am such a private person until having to reveal, for instance, that I was a victim of domestic violence. It was really hard. Nobody ever knew that. I never talked about it. But it was interesting because when I was in the legislature, I carried the Violence Against Women Act. I carried all kinds of bills relating to domestic violence. And, you know, and I'm still very active on issues around domestic violence. But until I started writing this book, you know, I never kind of put it all together until the editors, you know, because I wrote about all the policies that it relates to domestic violence, wrote about battered women's syndrome, talked about abuse, you know, and all the issues around the emergency rooms, you know, the types of, you know, injuries that are seen, you know. So I thought I did a pretty good job writing about it, but the editors kicked it back and they'd say, but, and then they'd send me 50 more questions to answer, and I would answer them, I thought, very intelligently. They'd kick it back, they said, no, there are too many holes here. I'd rewrite the answers, and they said, no, wait a minute. Now they said, a memoir, if you're gonna write a memoir, you have to be for real. The reader's gonna be able to see through these gaps, and so you've got to tell the truth. I said, well, this is the truth. They said, yeah, but it may be the truth, but there's something missing. So when I finally filled in the blanks, then they said, aha, this is what it's about. And I didn't want to write about it because I never talked about it. But I find now that in talking about it and writing about it, so many women come up to me and whisper to me, yeah, I know what you mean. so many men come up to me and say, because it's not anything, I didn't go into a male bashing thing. I tried to understand and write about what I think takes place in violent situations in the home. They come up to me and say, thank you for writing about that. So if the tough stuff I had to write about, abortion, being on public assistance with raising 2 little kids, domestic violence, all the stuff that many of us go through. If it'll help anybody, and if it'll help us understand what we have to do as human beings to make this world a better place, then I guess it was worth writing.